First off, Rafiq, I would really like to thank you and the Syrian Association for Citizens' Dignity, the European Institute of Peace, not only for the kind invitation, but also for the what I truly believe is groundbreaking and prescient work. You guys have been ahead of the curve, and the work that you do on concepts such as the safe environment uh, has been really important. I hope that in Europe you're getting all the support that you need, because the work that you're doing is this thinking outside the box, this creative thinking is something that we absolutely need. So the view, of course, I'm going to address your question regarding the bill, but I think I need to maybe describe the overall picture and maybe share with you a little bit about the view that we have, the view from Washington, D.C., the view, from across the pond. Uh, so if you were to ask, if you were to reach out to the State Department in Foggy Bottom and to ask what is U.S. policy towards Syria at the moment, they would say we have not changed our Syria policy. Syria policy remains the same. We're not going to be normalizing ties with the Assad regime, nor are we going to be lifting sanctions on the regime. If you reach out to DOD, the Department of Defense, they would also tell you that they're still committed to the mission in northeastern Syria, that they have no plans for withdrawing troops from northeastern Syria. So I think that would be true. These responses you would get would be true. But, and here comes our critique of, and by our, I mean the Syrian American community's critique of US policy. I think that would be true, but not entirely accurate. Why? So we would contend, our contention is that there actually has been a shift in U.S. policy, and we observed this shift a little over 2 years ago. U.S. policy used to be, we're not going to normalize ties with the regime. And if you're an ally of the United States, if you're an Arab country, and you take steps towards normalization, then hello, we have sanctions on the books, and you're going to be liable. That changed to, we're not going to normalize ties with the regime, but should you make the sovereign decision to normalize ties with the regime, this is your business. And maybe, while at it, maybe you can get something. So this transactionality was introduced, and I think that's why we have this Arab initiative at the moment, Arab track at the moment, and the decision is to give this Arab track a chance. With the hope that maybe it will produce some results. Now, of course, this was deeply concerning to our community, and that's when our organizations. I work for the Syrian American Council, which is the oldest and largest organization representing Syrian Americans. But I also work for the American Coalition for Syria, and that's an umbrella of 8 different organizations that coordinate their work in Washington, D.C. So all these organizations and others, about 2 years ago, when we noticed that shift in policy, we went to Congress, because the good and the bad news from the United States is that we have divided government. It's good news, it's bad news, but it's also good news. Because we have divided government, that means no one single entity or branch of the US government can make all the decisions or 100% of the decisions. And as you know, Congress has the constitutional right and responsibility to exercise oversight over the federal government. So our community expressed those concerns to lawmakers in Congress on a bipartisan basis, and that which means the Republicans and Democrats at the same time. And lawmakers initially gave the federal government, because we had a new boss in town, we had a new administration in town, so lawmakers gave this new administration a chance, grace period. But then there was alignment there was an alignment between our position and the lawmakers' position, and they started expressing those concerns to the federal government. Until a decision was made that lawmakers were not happy with the direction that American policy was taking, and they decided to take matters into their own hands. Since then, American lawmakers from both parties, Democrats and Republicans, have gone on the record over 6 different times in the House and in the Senate, basically stating their opposition to this tolerance of normalization or tacit green light that was given to normalization, and clearly expressing where they believe Syria policy should be headed. So now I can say that this opposition or this new position has solidified in Washington, D.C. There is overwhelming support for a vision of Syria policy that does not support, normalization, that says that so long as atrocities and war crimes and other violations persist, that sanctions will not be lifted. Among other things. And the bill that you asked me about, the Assad regime anti-normalization bill, was one of the more recent examples, because when it passed the House, it passed with 389 votes. The bill had 52 co-sponsors, original co-sponsors, Democrats and Republicans. And then when it was put on the floor for a vote, it garnered 389 votes, affirmative votes, versus 32 nays only. So that an overwhelming majority. And actually, just a few days ago, we were successful in also adding a new amendment to the Department of Defense, the NDA, the National Defense Authorization Act, regarding both normalization, two different amendments regarding both normalization, but also regarding captive money. So now on the books, we have 3 different pieces of legislation regarding Captagon, something that the administration also neglected in the past. And that's, when lawmakers, our community in partnership with lawmakers, stepped up and crafted policy that made it incumbent on the American federal government to take on this issue. About a month ago, Captagon 2, that's a second piece of legislation regarding dismantling the regime's drug networks, was passed. And just a few days ago, we had a new amendment that basically this new amendment asked the Department of Defense to step up its efforts regarding the combating of this trade and to treat it as a national security threat. So to sum up, I think now there is an alternative official voice in DC that is bipartisan, and that includes the president's party, the Democratic Party, that is not entirely pleased with the fact that the administration has sort of like deprioritized Syria over the past 2 years, and turned a blind eye, let's say, to normalization. And that has been clearly expressed to the administration. Initially, it was through tweets and statements, but then through letters to Secretary Blinken and the Secretary of Defense, and then through letters to President Biden, and then through 6 different pieces of legislation in just 18 to 19 months. So that is very, very significant. In our community in the United States, it would be no exaggeration to say that our community and our organizations have been at the forefront of this very active legislative movement. I'll conclude here with an example. So after the earthquake, the United States, to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian assistance, etc., issued General License 23. And General License 23 was a blanket general license that basically operated on the honor system. All you had to do was to basically stake the claim that a particular transaction was going to be carried out for humanitarian reasons, and you were covered under the General License 23, and it was issued for 6 months. Of course, sadly, the license was abused, and so there were some people in Washington, D.C. who wanted to extend that license for 2 years, and lawmakers were swift from both parties to speak up on that and to say absolutely not. So the State Department had to reach out to lawmakers to share with them that General License 23 was not going to be renewed. So here, the point that I would maybe encourage our European colleagues to take into consideration is that what we're working on in the United States should be actually welcomed as leverage. We are not interested in perpetuating the deadlock in Syria, and the work that we do is not because we simply just want to exact punishment on the regime. That's not what we have in mind. But what we have in mind is building leverage for Syrian and American and European negotiators. You may recall that the special envoy of the Secretary General, the office was created about 10 years ago, and over 10 years they've been trying to produce any progress, and they have not been able to produce any progress because the regime has been very intransigent. So in order to get any meaningful concessions from the regime, you need leverage. To go to the regime without leverage, you're going to get nothing, right? So we're trying to build that leverage, and we're saying that concessions can be made, but in return for measurable progress. And we have not seen that yet. So I hope that in Europe, these efforts that we've undertaken, I hope that they will be welcomed and seen in the right context. And this right context is we still have hundreds of thousands of people in jail. Half the population is displaced. So we want to ensure that American negotiators, European negotiators, and first and foremost, Syrian negotiators have the leverage they need in this process. And so everything we do is within this framework.
Let me ask you then another question, which will take 2 hours to answer. How do you see the possibility, does it exist, that we be able to move U.S. policy beyond what is, like you said, basically trying to contain normalization in some way, dealing with what are clearly interests of Europe and the West, and that is curbing the Captagon trade, and towards, for instance, elevating the establishment of the safe environment to the top of the political agenda, so that we are dealing with solutions rather than just simply trying to stop the leaks in the sinking ship.
Okay, so I'll be frank. U.S. policy over the past 2 years towards the entire region, towards the entire Middle East, has been one of conflict management, not conflict resolution. And that emanated from a desire. The president did not want to be consumed by Middle East crises. So when so after he won, he gave a very clear directive to his staff that he'd rather not be bothered every single day by wars and problems in the Middle East. So the policy that was designed, or the strategy that was designed on that basis, was one that really sought to ameliorate conditions, provide humanitarian assistance, maintain current conflict lines. So really, management of the symptoms of the conflicts generally across the region, in addition to working on the Abrahamic Accords, etc., but not one that wanted to really contend with the root cause of these issues and work on addressing these issues at their core. Syria was no exception. So the policy that they introduced or they adopted was also one of conflict management. So because of that, Syria generally was not prioritized. We always say personnel is policy, and we saw a market decrease in the number of personnel allocated to the Syria portfolio at the State Department, at the Treasury Department, and elsewhere. So I do not think that we are on the cusp of major rejuvenation of that thinking.
How would you then respond to what Dr. Sami was saying?
As
far as he believes that there will be
I don't know about a shakeup, but I actually agree with him that Syria is going to force itself onto the American agenda, simply because this policy of conflict management that I just it is completely blown up. Our national security advisor had an op-ed in Foreign Affairs that came out on October 7th that said the Middle East is the quietest it has ever been. Of course, that had to, in the print version, it's still there, but the online version, that had to be changed, right? So this policy proved to be ineffective. You do need to address problems at their cores, and Syria is no exception. So I agree with Dr. Taqi that eventually Syria is going to force itself onto the American agenda, and I think we're seeing some of that underway anyway. But in terms of American policymakers, at least within the federal, the executive branch of government, do I think that they're on the cusp of pursuing a different approach to Syria at the moment? No. Now, however, our representatives from our community recently, they engaged both campaigns, the Biden campaign and the Trump campaign, and there was recently a meeting in Michigan between our community and the Trump campaign, and we have the sense that should there be a change of guard in the United States, that there would be a different approach, and maybe that's something I can address later. So no, I don't think we're on the cusp, but I think slowly but surely they will come to this realization. They've been trying to avoid this problem. They tried that under the Obama administration. It completely failed, spectacularly failed. I think they tried to do that over the past 2 years, and it has not been effective. So eventually, I think they're going to have to contend with the fact that you do need a different approach.